Welcome back, everyone. We now proceed with our first session for today. Our discussion for today's first panel is on the topic regulatory framework and compliance. I invite our moderator, Mr. Kailash Babar, Deputy Editor ET, and our panelists, Mr. Sudip Mullick, Advocate, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, Founder and Chairman, Hiranandani Group, Mr. Ruchir Sinha, Managing Partner, Resolute Partners, and Mr. Sandip Bhagat, Partner, SNR Associates, to kindly join us on the dais. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Indian real estate has been undergoing, in particular, investment landscape has been undergoing a lot of changes over the last few years. The introduction of Real Estate Investment Trust, Main Board Real Estate Investment Trust, and now the Small and Medium Investment Trust is certainly an indication of that. Small and medium REITs can be a vital tool, approach, or mechanism to democratize investment in real estate, also allowing relatively smaller assets to find investment liquidity avenues. They not only offer path to the capital growth and investment generation for real estate investors, small real estate investors, but also contribute to the overall development of real estate market in India. So today we have an esteemed panel of experts with us to help us delve into it. So without further ado, let's dive into the discussion and hear it from them. I'll seek your response first, Ms. Mullick. What sets SM REITs and main board regular REITs apart?
Well, to start with, there has been a thought process of reducing costs in some manner, I can say. Like, for example, there is now only one investment manager as opposed to a sponsor and a manager. Now, the sponsor, you see the criteria, the financial criteria has gone up from 10 crores to 20 crores. And out of the 20 crores, 10 can be fixed, can be kept in bank accounts, government securities, etc., etc. Now, the investment manager himself can settle in trust the property and then by virtue of another agreement, run and manage the property. Besides this, there has been no other, you see, basically throughout the regulation, you'll see related party transaction has been looked down upon, which is a very, very fair proposition. Now, the lock-in period remains more or less the same, 15% of the units, and however, if it is not leveraged, then they can go up to 15% of the total value of the assets. So that is the lock-in criteria. One very important criteria that one must remember in these regulations is this, that it can only be invested in completed asset and asset which are revenue generating. Now that gives a lot of protection and comfort. The assets we are talking about investment REIT, not 500 crore, but 50 to 500 crore. Now there are a lot of properties across the country, and it will, to my mind, help a lot of hospitality industries, small hotels, small property. You see, businesses that we do not contemplate. Now, I do not know for sure, and they say that Indian economy is far bigger than what we really see, because there are certain components which we do not see and understand, and things that get played in markets that we do not travel. Well, as far as the upward, you see, there is the whole, there has to be a scheme and there has to be an SPV holding the asset. The entire shareholding of the SPV will be with the scheme. Now, about leveraging, the scheme can leverage from listed entities as well as from borrowings. However, the SPV can only do from ECBs and as well as from listed entities. They cannot do domestic borrowing. They also have to pass through 95% of the cash that they have upstream 95%, and that's not a small number. And the scheme will have to pass through 100% of what has been the net cash flow. They have to upstream that 100%. So if you see, and if you also see the intention that 50% of the directors should be independent, there are so many checks and balances. There is a provision for interest payment if there is the scheme is not registered, or if dividend is not distributed or paid. Now, in what we have seen is in the earlier REIT or in the bigger REITs, you can invest up to 80% in completed asset and 20% you can do whatever. This you cannot do here. You also have seen that in bigger REITs or REIT as such, there is no need to. I'm sorry, just my thought went away. I've lost a bit here, and basically we were on the pass-throughs, and then so this is let me say we have spoken about the independence of the board, we have spoken about pass-throughs, we have spoken about leverage, we have spoken about the dividend, and so actually there is nothing much that I can add, but this is it. I just cannot recollect the point that I was making. It is a very important point, but it should come back to me. I will during the course of the session. I don't want to waste everybody's time.
Sure. We'll come back to you. So, Mr. Hiranandani, we talk about some financial inclusion. How do you think small and medium REITs can help in democratizing investments in real estate, particularly for retail investors?
Thank you for inviting me over here. Thank you. Nice to have Babar in this panel with me. We have to understand that REITs all over the world, in some of the places was very successful, in some places not so successful. So the first round of REITs, which was done and moderated by SEBI, was to do to institutional investors rather than smaller and individual investors. After the experience of the last 10 years, which have taken place for the large REITs, SEBI decided that we should also get the benefits to small and medium REITs. And that's why what Mr. Mullick has really expounded is something which is beneficial to smaller projects, 50 to 500 crores, and that is what is there. The same controls which are there for the long, except with the changes which Mr. Mullick mentioned, is also applicable to the smaller REITs. So what's the advantage? The advantage number one, it's a pass-through. There's no tax for the particular instrument holding the REIT. This is a big story. What's the not so good story? So let's hear that too. The not so good story is that if you're an Indian resident directly holding a REIT, you're paying as an individual, you and I who are residents in India, 30-35% rate of tax. But if you are a foreigner holding this REIT from overseas, you pay 10 to 15% depending on the way the whole thing is structured. So it's grossly unfair. And we need to represent through Bombay Chambers, through various authorities, that this unfairness needs to be mitigated. So that's extremely important to understand between the two. The third most important thing which is there is the fact that differential type of commercial projects can be taken into a REIT, which is what Mr. Mullick was mentioning about. So whether it's a hotel, as long as there is a continuous flow of income that can be done and which can be regular, that can be done. So when you do investment into a real estate company, there are so many variances which take place. But if you're investing into a REIT, because it's supposed to be rented out compulsorily, 100% as Mr. Mullick just mentioned to you, then there is no risk at all in terms of getting the income, unless of course there's a crisis like a COVID where the entire rental does not work, which has not happened in India at all. In fact, post-COVID, we have seen a resurgence back again of the REITs which have taken place. So I think these are the major benefits in the taxation part of it is there, and we really need to do it. There are other smaller issues in terms of things which have not been considered by the government in the case of smaller properties. For example, when we transfer a property from a limited company to a REIT, it's tax-free. But if you're a partnership or an LLP and you transfer it to a REIT, you pay full capital gains tax. So that's a problem. So we need to actually represent again that you have brought in this new idea, but how can you be unfair and say only for limited companies you should get this benefit and not be given to partnerships and other things? So I think there are, but this is the first year, it's the beginning. Obviously, the government also wants to see how the work is going to be successful and not successful as far as this goes. But what Mr. Mullick adhered to is also extremely interesting. The manager of the REITs have great responsibility because, and depending on the credibility of the manager of the REIT, the valuation of the REIT in the capital markets will be better or worse. So if a person who's a manager of the REIT is a credible person, so it is not necessary that the asset owner also becomes the manager of the REITs, which happens in some of the larger REITs which have taken place. In this case, it's possible that you get a professional person to run a REIT, and which would be an advantage which would take place as far as we are concerned. So I think all these factors are really making REITs to do it. Two advantages which are taking place further is the change in capital gains tax regime. Capital gains tax regime that is now taken place. Capital gains tax regime that has taken place, which is of course that you have a 12.5% capital gains tax in terms of it, which was earlier 20% in terms of it. So I think that is going to be extremely important. One of the other negatives which is there, and I want to point it out, is the high stamp duty and other taxes while transferring the REIT, transferring the properties to a REIT. So this really covers what Mr. Mullick was trying to put across as to balance issues which are there. He's covered the first aspects of it tremendously well, so we have to thank him for it. And I've tried to cover up the second part of the assets in terms of what are the taxabilities and other issues, as Mr. Babar was asking me to cover.
The point that I missed was that in this REIT, you will get quarterly interest as opposed to 6 months interest. So that is for people of the size of investment we are looking at is very helpful. And as Mr. Niranjan Hiranandani has already pointed out, I need to say, whilst the importance of the manager is important, in REIT he should have had 5 years experience. In SM REIT we have brought it down to 2 years of experience. However, he can have a manager. So that is something which we need to be mindful of. But again, considering the size and the fact that they would be owning the asset, knowing the asset, doing it properly, so maybe that is the reason.
Mr. Sinha, what are the commercial pockets you see unleashing with small and medium REITs? And do you think this form of REITs will have what it takes to attract international capital, institutional capital?
एक तो पहली बार मेरे को मिस्टर सिन्हा बोला है लाइफ में.
Should I call you Ruchir?
Call me what you call me.
Going with the decorum, I thought I call you.
Okay, so I thought थोड़ा वकीलों का नाम बदनाम है क्योंकि हम लोग बड़े complicated तरीके से बात करते हैं. Kailash was telling me when I came here that how many questions can I ask, and I said just ask 2 questions sufficient. Is that what if we fall short? I said later. There are 3 lawyers. I can assure you, you're never going to fall short. Okay, so let me just go back. By the way, you know, थोड़ा सा माहौल सेट कर देते हैं जैसे कि people can understand what these REITs are. It's more relatable. You know, 2008-9, when a lot of foreign capital was coming into India, we used to tell our Singaporean friends that world things are outsourcing to India. India is outsourcing to Singapore. One, justice delivery. More and more arbitrations happen in Singapore. So we have successfully delivered outsourced justice delivery. And second is capital markets. Because more and more of Indian real estate listings were happening then, if you remember, on the Singapore Business Trust and S REITs and all this stuff. And India bulls and people suffered some degree of losses. And uske baad India लोगों ने थोड़ा मजाक में बोलना शुरू किया, it's India, I will never do it again. okay? And it really stopped for some time. And then I think what eventually happened is that people realized that the Indian markets are opening up, strata sale is not the way to go, you really need large institutional buyers, okay? REITs were then created to come up and give a buying landscape to the large, shopping malls and commercial malls and so on and so forth. Now, the big challenge that was happening, and sometimes I feel, is that you make money in the smaller pockets. Some gentleman just came to me some time back. Oh, mere ko bola ki I want to raise foreign capital and I want to invest in 500 square feet shops, the chemist shops and this and that. The returns are exponential. Now, the challenge is that as a foreign investor, I'm going to link the story back, by the way. The challenge is, as a foreign investor, you are not permitted to invest in completed assets unless those assets are shopping malls or business centers. So there is no way you can do it. Now you see, the moment you have a REIT, as a foreign portfolio investor, you can invest. So now what has happened is you've opened up a massive demand to, आप जाके दुकान खरीद सकते हैं, बैंड्रा का, निरंजन जी का लोखंड पवई के कुछ एक दो फ्लैट लेके जिन पे रिटर्न अच्छा आ रहा है, आप एयरबिन पे देके उसको रेंट जनरेटिंग बना के, you can make money on that. All of that has now opened up tremendous opportunities. And I was just joking around with Pramod. I said, long back, I read a Harvard case study. It was called regulatory entrepreneurship. Sometimes there are certain businesses which are created on the edge of law, like Uber, right? It was illegal because you could not run taxis in New York without having a taxi permit. Airbnb, you could still not run it in many places because it's illegal in our society. Then the government brought about a law to regularize it. So the business is so interesting that government needs to find a way to regularize it. So Uber taxi regulations came up, this came up, and I think fractional ownership, by the way, was on the edge of law because in my mind, it was a collective investment scheme. Okay, we've defended some of these people, lost on it as well, and if you really look at it, assured returns and all in pooling, you will find it very difficult to hold a hand to your heart and say this is not collective investment scheme. So I think for all those people who are thinking this is optional, I believe this is your glide path, take it. If this is not done, I don't think you have a pathway, okay? So I think that's the way I look at them. Now, let's look at some other pockets where you said that, where do I see interest? I heard some gentlemen were asking, what about hospital assets, education assets? You see, education and hospital assets, and by the way, these are the classic OPCO-PROPCO structures, the way they work in global environments. I think it's like, you're losing up your balance sheet to better your P&L. So you own, let's say, an education institution's land, you sell the land to a REIT, and the REIT leases it back to you. Okay, you get a bump up. And you get your whatever cap rate compression and so on and so forth. But at the end of it, you have loosened up your capital for investments and all that. And I think that is a great opportunity. Is it infrastructure? I think, unfortunately, because we didn't have SM REITs, let me tell you, we were trying to force fit some of these assets into InvITs, into infrastructure. In my mind, infrastructure really would mean, when you say education institution capital stock, it means you are running the education institution and you are owning the building also. If you just own the building pure play, in my mind, that is not infrastructure, that is pure play real estate. It's because your income is nothing else but leasing. So I think I'd answered some of the questions somebody was asking here. I see some of these peripheral opportunities where you can have a massively great IRR. I mean, I was just telling somebody, and I speak very commercially, I'm not a lawyer really, I mean, I am, but I don't think of myself. So if you look at it, if you're talking about a commercial asset or a rental asset, yield, or so your house, your yield is limited. If you're renting it out, you turn it up into a serviced housing, yield goes up. You turn it into a student housing where you put 3-4 beds, yield bumps up, okay? And I feel that a lot of people like Good Host Spaces and some of these people who are running captive, housing opportunities, etc. I think for those people, this is a great way to do the classic sale leaseback structures and also raise foreign capital. And I feel that all those people who are trying to do this, fractional owners do it. I think SEBI got it for the fractional owners, but it's benefited a large number of people because of the structures and the potentiality that it can offer. So I think Kailash will offer me one more question because, he spoke with me and said, I'm going to ask you too, so I'm not speaking on the other bit now.
Thank you. Mr. Hiranandani, what are the key drivers for future growth of these SM REITs in India, and how can regulatory changes support that?
The first part of the story, I think, is a lovely thing to talk about because with 7% growth and the fastest growing nation in the whole world, I think there's no question that we will not grow. Number two, we always thought that, like you found in New York, 30% of the commercial assets are lying empty. In India, it's the reverse. So whatever has done, in fact, commercial assets use has gone up in the last 2 years post-COVID. So I think that's the second growth indicative that is there. The third growth indicative is the urban infrastructure growth which is taking place. So if you look at something which we are more familiar with, which is Mumbai, we had 190 kilometers of suburban rail for 65 years. And in the next 3 years, we will add 300 kilometers of metro. We just started the suburb, the first underground part of it, but that was only 5 or 7 kilometers. But you're going to add 300 plus kilometers in the next 3 years. You have the Atal Bridge, you have the coastal road. So I think the growth drivers is the multiplier effect of the investments which are taking place as far as infrastructure by the government is concerned. And the new airport, of course, coming in across the harbour. A combination of all this is going to create a multiplier effect in the urban areas. So while you look at GDP growth in 7% as a nation, you will find city growths in places like Mumbai growing at 15% to 17% growth compounded per annum for the next 5 years. So the growth story in this area is going to be even faster. So I think the growth drivers is both government investment, infrastructure development that is taking, innovative private investment which is taking place in terms of it, and also the capacity to be able to grow environmentally friendly projects. Look at the kind of ESG that the Prime Minister is talking about and the work that is going on. So I think that's another growth driver which is there. What are the headwinds that you see? So the headwinds, according to me, was Russia-Ukraine war. Nothing happened. The headwinds, according to me, was the problem of oil, which was the Middle East oil because of the Russia-Ukraine war. It didn't happen. We managed to buy it from Russia. We have the Jerusalem, the war between Israel and the rest of Middle East. Till today, touch wood and thank God, we have not been affected. So look at the prices in terms of interest rise, which is a very big negative to my affordable housing segment. I mean, horrible. My whole affordable housing segment in India has dropped simply because interest rate hike has just hit the affordable housing segment. But look at the growth drivers on the other hand. So we have a multiplier effect of the growth drivers, and I don't see that slowing down. Interest rate, as far as the US is concerned, is already 25%, 25 basis points down. RBI should follow it, probably will not do in the first round because of the Middle East war having been escalated. But I think otherwise we would have followed the interest rate fall, which is necessary for India to continue to grow at the rate which is there. And no other country is growing at that rate. So the growth drivers, as far as India is concerned, has been able to balance East and West in terms of whatever it is. And I do believe that the growth driver in terms of residential, commercial will grow at a pace which is unprecedented. My estimate, real estate, 12 to 15% GDP growth, growth in real estate in the next 2 years. Commercial real estate, surprising me, surprising everybody, it's also growing at 10-12%. So the combination of these two things which we see as far as real estate is concerned is really going. One of the things which totally shocks me is the growth of middle income housing and luxury housing. First time in my whole career of 40 plus years, the growth in these two sectors has been faster than affordable housing. Never happened in my whole career, but it has happened now. Partly because of interest rate hike and also the fact that the PMAY scheme got over last year. Now it's coming back again, so I think affordable housing may get a boost again. but interest rate may take some time to do. So overall, real estate is going to grow. Middle income, luxury housing seems to grow much faster and continue to do. Commercial is continuing to grow as far as this is concerned. Work from home, which we were threatened, people would work from home much more. India doesn't seem to have followed that to the extent to which is there. It has happened, but not to that extent. So all in all, growth drivers in terms of commercial is huge for India. If we can keep up this leadership in terms of doing it, in terms of improving skills, that's the one internal headwind. The internal headwind is the non-availability of skills in the market. So for example, in the real estate market, 10, 15 years ago, when I wanted 100 construction workers, I would get 500 easily. Today, when I want 100 construction workers, and I'm not talking about very IT-driven people, I want carpenters, fitters, plumbers, painters, and these people, I don't get 20. So with the growth of industry, growth of highways and other things, we are challenged. So these are the internal headwinds, but by and large, I still think India's growth story is beautiful. So love India, love Bharat, and
So you expect this to have an impact on SM REITs as well, right? So to impact
SM,
demand
the small and medium REITs is a quarter of 1% of the total market, or less than that. So, of course, it will have a positive effect. There is no question about not happening. But commercial REITs, regular commercial REITs will also have an impact. The small and medium REITs will have an impact. But the overall economy is so strong that there will be no sector not having an impact. The question is, we have to see to it that the only thing important is execution. In our country, all the drivers are correct. The only thing is, many times we lack is execution of the will or the directions which has happened. If we can do skilling at the same pace at which we are talking, if we can do all the other growth drivers in terms of infrastructure, execution, the way we are doing up till now, 35 kilometers of national highway per day. I mean, who could have imagined 35 kilometers of national highway per day, the fastest in the entire world. So I think it's a beautiful growth story. And Kailash, I think, love to be in India and love to be an Indian at this point of time in life.
great time for all of us.
Actually, Kailash might be interesting if Niranjan ji or somebody, or maybe as part of your one of your ET articles, you should draw out the IRRs that you make. Like how much do you make on rental yield? Now that bit everybody knows. But how much do you make, let's say, on a small chemist shop? Besides, so much of this is just in cash. Now, we just deployed close to $1 billion into Zepto for 2 different clients. And we are talking about dark stores and putting them into SM REITs. And then just imagine. And somebody should do the computation on a levered basis, how much do you really make? And those numbers are astronomical. मुझे किसी ने बताया था investment करने ATM machine खरीदी दुकान के लिए. It was the best. So I think some of those opportunities are coming out, and thinking of it commercially, and that's what you should do as a journalist. Pick up some of these IRRs and say, okay, this is what you really make. And that's a story that foreign investors need to hear. The problem is those who have made money have gone quiet, and those who haven't made money have made all the noise.
Provided we get all the transparent data on that, who makes how much. Okay, I think Mr. Hiranandani needs to.
I'm sorry, I've been required to go to the High Court to sign some consent terms where I was not required, but the judge wants me there, so I just have to leave you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, sir. Mr. Bhagat, can you throw some light on, is it necessary for an FOP to convert or into, say, an SM REIT?
Yeah, thanks. I think people are talking about opportunities. My view is, if you look at where the regulations are and what's happening. So as somebody just told me from the audience, there are more than 100 FOP platforms out there. 6 have got registered with SEBI, right? Even if you assume that 20% of the remaining, then you're looking at least 20 more getting registered. And the reason to get registered, I think Mr. Rao mentioned that, but ultimately, and what Ruchir has also said, is that there is an inherent question of legality of the way the current FOPs are working. Okay, are they making invitations and offers to more than 200 persons? That's an issue. Are they a collective investment scheme? Are they behaving like something else? I think for a lot of them, yes, there would be compliance, yet there would be, you need to sort out whether or not your particular asset comes within the definition of REIT. But there are SEBI FAQs out there which actually say that, look, while it's not mandatory if you don't fit in the definition of a REIT. At least to me, I would read that, and that's one of the questions what you have asked is what is a frequent question coming to us. Do I need to switch over to the FOP from the FOP platform to the SM REIT? And our answer is, unless the way your assets are held, unless these are not REIT assets, they don't qualify for that. I think the answer to us is yes. So if there are at least 100 of these platforms out there, I think there's a fair assumption that there would be a fair number which would go under this. So to me, actually, I think if this is indeed taken to the next logical step where action is taken against some of these others, they will actually start moving to the FOP platforms. You may actually see a far greater growth of SME REITs than anything which you've anticipated, which is for the good. But I think, so that's one thing. So if I'm being asked the question, my answer is yes, unless, as I said, you don't even qualify for the definition of what a REIT is. So to those 96 plus, I would think, or 94 plus platforms, they need to seriously think about what they are doing. The other issue which sometimes we are being asked, so I think, look, the investors today who are in the FOP platforms are asking, why should we incur the additional expense to migrate to the SM platform? There is an expense, there is also regulatory. I'm comfortable with my investment. I know what my tax is. I know how I'm getting. Okay, fine, I've been promised 18% or whatever the numbers are. But, in many cases, people are getting that. That does not, I think, why should I move over to SM REIT platform unless I'm required by law? And I think, to me, the answer is start preparing and start thinking about it and start doing it before tomorrow your entire structure itself is questioned as to why you're doing it. So to me, that's one kind of threshold thing to think about in this. And I think the other question which we are being asked is, if you have a regular commercial REIT, the buyer and the seller and the REIT manager can take their time to sell the asset. Okay, Nexus City Mall is a REIT established by Blackstone. We helped Select City, which is a big mall in Delhi, sell that asset to the owners of that, sell that asset to the Nexus Mall, and they got units. The transaction took about 9 months plus, because it's like any regular IPO you do. It takes time to set up the structure, it takes time for an offer document or prospectus to be done, and it's a bigger asset going there. I think, so the seller and the buyer both are willing to wait. In the SMA REIT, in the FOP and therefore transitioning, one of the questions being asked is, listen, the seller is not waiting around that much to realize his exit. And if you are at the platform end and you are trying to buy the asset, it's taking, they don't necessarily want to take too long. And I think, again, the answer to that is twofold. One is, given the inherent nature of FOP, you need to be thinking about moving to a REIT platform. And secondly, I think the regulator is moving and will move to and already taking less time, is supportive of, faster review of documents, faster clearances, etc., which, you need to have that sensible discussion with them to be it. But that can't be a reason for you to say, listen, my business model is such that the seller isn't willing to wait to sell me the asset, and therefore I'm not getting enough time to go through the SEBI review process. I think you have to be able to manage that as part of the this thing. I think the third thing, let me just briefly, I may be going off your question, but you know, what are the new assets you can bring into this, and what is a real estate asset? We face this question all the time when we are doing REITs versus InvITs. I mean, our firm did the first InvIT, which was for IRB. We did the first REIT, which was for Embassy REIT. So, you know, when the regulations and when the first InvIT, for example, came about, which was, I think, 2016, 17, actually the risk factor said, which we put in the, look, we are not sure if this regulation, if insider trading applies, if LODR, which is the regulation, applies. A lot has evolved. Takeover code applies, all of that. I think the regulations have evolved a lot. So your SME REITs are actually coming in at a time when there's much greater clarity and clarity on what the regulatory framework is. The distinction between what constitutes a real estate asset and what constitutes a infrastructure asset under that harmonized list is an active issue even today. And that's because we have set up separate platforms, if you will, for a REIT versus an InvIT. Okay. Someone asked warehousing. Actually, the FAQs by SEBI have actually specifically said, listen, warehousing, if it meets those minimum thresholds under the harmonized list, they come under infrastructure. SME REIT cannot invest in those. But if the warehousing is part of a integrated scheme, then it can. Now, if it's not one or the other, then it's obviously not part of the regulation. But I think, again, my view would be there's no SM InvIT, which is kind of what people are asking really when they're saying, can you do, you know, put it in the, can you put hospital assets, can you do that?
My question is why not?
And so maybe that's the evolution.
The regulator sitting here.
Yeah, so I you know, you can do it two ways. One is fix the definition of what constitutes the asset, but then that may go against the regulation on the main InvIT, or you know, I think that's something which has to be again given feedback to, but there's a lot of questions coming, not just from this audience, but we've had questions come up on, can I include this asset here, you know, hotel somebody mentioned, can I include a hotel? Is hotel a part of infra or is it a part of real estate? That is the question we are grappling with. If the hotel is part of an integrated township or it's part of the integrated asset of the REIT, then yes, then you know, it's kind of obvious. Outside that, it comes into this. So I think that's the third question which a lot of people are asking us, can I include X or Y asset as part of SM REIT? And you know, the answer is it is SM REIT today. It's not SM InvIT. So, and I think part of it is it's being formed and it's kind of come out on the basis of FOPs. And it's being taken care of the initial bit, which is FOPs. But I think it should evolve. I think there's definitely scope for 50 to 500 and, you know, in that asset.
And what are the other practical, like you said, the seller or the developer usually is not ready to wait for an approval coming through. What are the other practical challenges that you see in this process?
See, some of the conditions which have been applied, I think, when one looks at, so you need, for each scheme, you need a minimum of 200 investors. Okay. That may be a challenge to find unless you've got an active market. So it's chicken and the egg, you know, because these are going to be listed units. Are you going to be initially able to find? Now, there is some relaxation given in that also, that if you're migrating, then that 200 limit may not apply. But the reason for 200 limit is, you know, it comes from the private placement regulation. So there is a reason for that. But trying to find 200, you know, if you don't have that many in your original or you're trying to find new investors and all, I think those are, well, operational issues which need to be, and I think as we get more listed, maybe they will come back with feedback I think the 10 lakh one minimum lot size is an issue if you are trying to attract retail. And again, these are not new issues. We face these issues in InvIT and REIT. Minimum lot was higher, it was reduced over time. I think minimum lot is actually one now in regular REIT. So I think there are going to be some practical challenges to somebody who's used to a FOP platform where he's an investor, he's got CCDs, he's got equity shares, the SPV is going around acquiring assets, and he's getting, mega promise returns. But I think that bit challenges is something which I think needs to be continually discussed to be able to resolve. But that will be, I think, one of the practical issues.
Thank you. Mr. Mullick, how does the migration of FOPs into SM REITs take place, and what are the key regulatory factors that will govern the same?
So 6 months is given to them for registration, 6 months for migration, and within a period of 3 years they have to offer it. The initial offer has to be done. Now, as far as the shares of the existing SPVs can be swapped with the units. So this is primarily, these are the rest, I think Mr. Bhagat has explained. So these are only the norms that I can think of.
Sure. So, Ruchir, now I'm calling you Ruchir, okay? So, Mr. Bhagat did mention about some practical challenges. But what do you think are the dampeners, and what do you think will provide the much needed shot in the arm to SM REITs from a regulatory and tax perspective for this segment to pick up?
Yeah. I think, see, one thing clearly, InvITs came after REITs. And yet we have only about 4 REITs, and we have more than 24, 25 InvITs. So clearly, it's kind of lag behind. The one big challenge, I think, and Pramodji, this is the submission to you. I think one big challenge has been that REITs have always been mandatorily required to be public listed. And there is some degree of apprehension we hold in our hearts to real estate as an asset class, that we are overcautious, as if it keeps on growing. I remember doing those deals in 2007, 8, 9, when we used to structure distribution waterfall. And we used to be like, okay, after 15 to 18% IRR, 18 to 20, 25, 30, 35. And I'm like, will this ever stop somewhere? This is at the end of it just an asset. But you never understood real estate, right? So this whole challenge of speculation, etc., has somewhere made us overcautious. And while InvITs need not be public listed, REITs must be public listed. And so the challenge will be that you must have 200 investors. Each investor must be putting in minimum of 10 lakh rupees because that's the ticket size. And the overall SM REIT minimum investment is only 50 crores. So, I think somewhere the unit economics need to make sense. And probably it is time that, when you want to give pivot or you want to galvanize a sector to grow, you need to maybe take a little bit light touch approach, and maybe SM REITs could be one of them. So like for InvITs, we actually, I think one thing that was super exciting for us, which Sandip and I together did, was the first unlisted InvIT, where we were representing GIC and they were doing IRB. And then somehow, it got shut down, and then now it is private listed. But even in private listed InvITs, there is some degree of comfort because, you don't need to find those 200 people. It can just be a smaller, 5, 7 number, larger institutional investors, and people can have interest. So I think one big challenge is the public listing of the REIT. The second challenge I believe in this product, which might be, is stamp duty, because most of the people will not be, unlike larger commercial assets or shopping malls, etc., which are usually held by SPVs. These kind of assets or smaller assets are usually held directly. So you might as well sell the asset and not the SPV shares. And if you sell the asset directly, you will end up paying 5, 6, whatever percent stamp duty. And it's a big cost, So that's the second challenge, stamp duty. Third bit is that under the Income Tax Act, if you transfer your SPV shares for the units, you generally have a tax exemption. Not tax exemption, it's a tax deferral because you then pay tax on the original value when you actually sell the units. But on the transfer of the SPV shares to the InvIT or the REIT, or what we call a business trust, there is no tax there. But that exemption under Income Tax Act exists only when you're transferring SPV shares, not the asset directly. So now when you're transferring, first you pay stamp duty and then you also end up paying capital gains. Okay, so that's the third hit from a tax perspective. The other challenge I feel is, let me just put out, sorry. Positive things I know, negative I need to look at. That's a good way to function. Achha, then I think the other bit is, and I completely, and by the way, sorry, just while speaking on tax, there's been very interesting development in this budget. Historically, when whatever income you earn from an asset, if it was a residential asset, and I'm talking about residential assets, you could take a view whether it is house property income or income from business. And most people like to take a view that it is business income and therefore set out business expenses. Because in income from house property, you only get standard deductions. This time they've said that any house property, you don't have option to call it profits, you can't qualify it under income from business or profession. It must only be house property. So all your ability to claim expenses or leverage and all that has been taken away. So I don't know how it was planned, but it seems pretty interesting that the budget came and then SM REITs have come. The other thing I think which is pretty interesting, and I've been trying to grapple, Sudip, is this migration bit, So now SEBI is giving a glide path. But if later on, those people who don't take this glide path, how will the migration happen? Because remember, investment manager cannot buy. He cannot be the sponsor. And he's only a service provider. So for all the fractional owners, etc., who own the asset right now, tomorrow they go to migrate themselves, want to become the investment manager, they will get stuck. So they should take this migration path of this right now, otherwise later on, if you don't have the glide path, I don't know how that will work. I somehow also feel that while it is good that you only have professional managers acting as investment manager, I think somewhere it might be good to have a sponsor or a developer somewhere, like property owner. If I have a property, I'm incentivized to put that. Why just have professional managers? If I have a property, let's say I have 2 properties. Imagine I'm a rich man. Imagine I have 2 flats of 50 crores. And I now want to put them into a REIT. Okay? Why can't I do it? Why should I be disentitled? Now, you are trying to, of course, and I think that's been somewhere the approach with real estate. In 2000, we've been involved closely, 15-16 as part of a policy body that I chair. We were very closely involved in drafting of REIT regulations. And when we were drafting that time, the question came about sponsor. You see, in a mutual fund, a sponsor is just an anchor investor. But in a REIT or an InvIT, आप sponsor को पकड़ लेते हो कि नहीं तुम्हारा नाम है, तुमको छोड़ेंगे नहीं, तुम पे लॉक इन लगा देंगे, ये कर देंगे, co-liability. Why? Because you really feel that people will put money on the basis of these sponsors. So I think somewhere in our minds, we need to de-risk and stay away from the idea of, being overcautious, maybe. So I think that's the other bit which I feel is that I think for a sponsor perspective, I think maybe at some stage you can have, you can allow.
I think I can see them saying that time is up, but just the one final thing which is common to REITs today also, which is less on the SEBI front but more on the regulatory, is banks are not allowed to lend to REITs. So term loans, etc. is a big problem. So REITs raise funds through NCD issuances mostly. And that will continue with that. Again, this is a RBI being extra cautious on the real estate sector. Banks are allowed to invest in real estate companies. But for some reason, lending to REIT is a problem. Lending to InvIT is not. So there is some, I think to the extent this product grows here, I would encourage more people to start sending letters to the RBI, or at least, saying that why is there this distinction. But I think that's just one practical challenge if you're listening.
Actually, it's after a long time that their incentive has come just for real estate. Otherwise, I think after this government came, I was led to believe every incentive will only come if you say the word infrastructure. If you said real estate, then the mood's just turned off. Okay.
Great. So we have time for a couple of questions, quick ones, if anybody has.
Yeah. Very quick questions, and if you could just keep it as one per person, so that'll be helpful. 2 quick questions anybody has. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. My question is to Mr. Sandip. You mentioned on the number of FOPs which are there in the market, which may be required to be registered, maybe not now, today, or in future. But what happened to those fraction ownerships which have assets below 50 crore, wherein they don't fall under the REIT definition?
Yeah, so again, I think they need to think, obviously they can't be qualified under the REIT, but can the REIT, for example, take 2-3 of these assets as part of a scheme and make it so that the aggregate amount is more than 50 crores? I think those are the questions. So the scheme has to have more than 50 crores. Scheme can have more than one SPV. So the part of it could be that you structure it so that there are 3 SPVs going in, which then together hit the hurdle of 50 crores. So I think that may be one solution for somebody who's thinking about that.
In case where there is only one asset, let's say, which is, let's say, below
I'm
50
so
crore.
sorry, we'll have to cut you short there because we need to give the mic to one more person. So I'm so sorry about this. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, saved me. I wouldn't have
We
had
will
an
take
answer
that
for that.
offline with him.
Yeah, we can take more questions offline. We have tea break after the next session. So any discussions, we can take it offline. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the insightful information and thoughts that you guys shared. I'm sure each of you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you so much.
Kailash, do stay back for a photo. We'll have a quick photograph now, and I also request our Director General, Mr. Sandip Ghosla, to kindly present the mementos. And thank you so much for that insightful discussions. Thank you.